Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Today in the studio, we have two distinguished gentlemen. We're going to talk about software development and efficient practices for the federal government. Our guests in the studio are Doguhan Uluca, Principal Fellow Modern Software Delivery, and Keith Mealo, Engagement Manager from a company called Excella, EXCELLA.com. If you want more information, they have all kinds of stuff on their website, all kinds of activity on the Twitter feed. They specialize in software and modern software delivery. And I think this is a big question for many people who are listening here. Today, we're going to talk about 4 or 5 main topics. We're going to delve into something called FISMA High Impact. We're going to talk about supply chain, maybe touch on the ever-present Zero Trust, maybe see about Excel. What the heck Excel is different? What's your special sauce? What's going on here? Before we begin, the gentleman with the unusual first name, tell us about your background, and you can criticize me for not pronouncing your name correctly if you want.
Hi, John. Great to be here. That was a pretty decent pronunciation, so no criticisms there. I am originally from Turkey, immigrated to the U.S., went to Virginia Tech for computer science. About 15 plus years into my career as a software developer / author / speaker. I write about technology. I like web development, cloud architecting, and delivering agile solutions.
Great. That's what we hit on today. And Keith, maybe a little bit of your background, please.
Sure thing, John. Thanks for having us. My name is Keith. I'm from Maryland. I did my undergraduate degree there and my master's program. I've been working with federal consulting at the government for probably the past 20 years. And through various number of agencies. I'm currently working with the national security market for Excella, and I've been partnering with Doguhan to help our modern software delivery practice, deliver some of the most secure code that we can be contracted to deliver for the government. One of the things that we've been trying to do is exceed the compliance outcomes that typically our clients are looking for to comply with FISMA regulations and go above and beyond in delivering more outcome-based results.
Well, gentlemen, you probably don't realize it, but I would expect any day now we're going to get an executive order, and it's going to mandate John Gilroy to say an acronym every 32 seconds in these podcasts. So I got to have an acronym. I don't have a choice here, gentlemen. So I got the acronym of choice. I'm going to reach into the grab bag and pull out an acronym. It's going to be FISMA High Impact. Okay, so when it comes to software delivery, Doguhan, what does FISMA High Impact mean, and how does your company work with the government to achieve that?
FISMA stands for the Federal Information Security Modernization Act. It was a law that was passed in 2002 to ensure a baseline level of security for information security systems that are deployed within the federal government. So high impact there stands for high confidentiality, high integrity, and high availability. There are also medium and low impact levels. Currently, Keith and I have been working on a high impact solution in the, as he mentioned, in the past 4 years.
So normally this is contrasted with a different category called FedRAMP. So maybe a quick discussion of both of those, how they compare.
Sure. Yeah. FedRAMP is the public facing side of it. So if I had a product that I wanted to operate within the federal government, it would have to go through the FedRAMP program to be certified at a low, medium, or high impact level. So, for example, in our FISMA high impact solution, we can only use FedRAMP high certified products.
Got it. So 2 completely different subjects here, as long as our listeners know that.
It's different sides of the same coin, basically.
Yeah. So, Keith, my question to you is, in preparing for this interview, I read all kinds of articles about software development. Boy, everyone's got a different number. 80% of all software code developed today is from off-the-shelf software. It's 72%, 59%. I don't know what the percentage is, but I think people are starting to worry about, memory-safe languages, reusing code. And so where does this fit in the discussion with secure software?
One of the things that we try and look at is how does the supply side risks factor into the solutions that we're delivering. From the off-the-shelf products that you purchase and you implement on the client site to custom code that you're building, although you may use open source libraries, and some of that may actually, contain some supply chain risks. And from that, we need to have a high degree of vigilance and not trust the sources as much as we do, and kind of tails into the zero trust stance of always making sure that there's no service within your boundary that you implicitly trust. The process that we're working with our clients in the national security market, we're doing a lot of custom code development. And with the FISMA high impact systems, there are a lot of principles that we need to meet. I believe there's in excess of 700 different security controls. And we need to build to those FISMA high impact settings for anything that comes through the door, whether it's an off-the-shelf implementation or if it's a custom code delivery. And we're also looking into building compliance to those security requirements in our AI and data analytics offerings as well. So if there are data processing systems that are happening within the federal government space, we're applying the FISMA principles to that as well.
So, Doguhan, that's a hot topic. Everyone's talking about this of artificial intelligence. So maybe you can just chime in here real quickly and talk about how this can help with software development, just a little bit.
Yeah, there's been a huge insurgence of AI assist tools that came out recently. It's kind of started with GitHub Copilot, and it burst into wide adoption with ChatGPT, and now Microsoft has moved that technology into Bing, and they have also announced moving, similar technologies into the Microsoft Office suite. So with AI-assisted tools, it's a great way to learn and understand new topics that we're unfamiliar with. However, we need to recognize that when we ask AI to generate some kind of code for us, or it tries to improve what we've written, it's merely a suggestion. It's just someone tapping you on the shoulder and telling you, hey, consider this. It is otherwise a huge risk to just simply copy and paste code. And this is similar to other tools like Stack Overflow. It's just in general a big mistake to just copy paste code and use it without understanding it, because we've seen it in the supply chain. Some bad actors sneak in inconspicuous looking code into a project, widely used project, and then they later try to exploit that. And similar exploits exist in the AI space as well. Bad actors train the AI to develop bad code, basically, and unassuming developers can easily put that into their software and introduce a vulnerability that they're not aware of into their systems.
Yeah, at one point, someone smart told me once, you have a choice between people writing bad code or computers writing bad code. People writing bad code is what the government is looking at. Also with that, these AI models also are hungry for inputs. So as you go through and you're putting your code out there, you're using the variable names possibly that are integral to your systems. You have to pay attention to whether that is pushing information that should not be pushed beyond the government boundary into the AI model itself.
Keith, I'd like to maybe jump away from AI, maybe another topic down the road. I want to talk about something even more difficult. And this topic is human beings. This is the hard part. I once worked with a brilliant guy. I mean, software engineer. He's worth multi millions right now, and he would not use the seatbelt. He just his little thing. He'd drive around with that thing beeping, and he was smart. He knew everything. He could code. He could do engineering. He was a whiz. He was an athlete, and he hated using his seatbelt. And so my question to you, Keith, is: so how do you control the human part of it? Where's the user base? How do you get buy-in from the user base on this software security? I think it's a big part of the discussion.
Well, for me, it starts with a team. The folks that are putting these software pieces into place, the people from the government that are managing either the off-the-shelf solution or the custom-coded solution or the AI and analytics solution that we've put together, getting people to care about the outcomes. is really key to making a team very security conscious, mission focused, whether you're working with immigrations and you want to ensure that people coming to America to participate in the American dream have the smoothest transition possible, or if you're working in a law enforcement system and you want to make sure that the downstream users, the people might be special agents or something like that, that they have the right level of support and not put in harm's way because of failing security practices, at the level of building software. So aligning the government mission to the team's mission and building that level of buy-in, helps people put their seatbelts on. One of the things that has been really integral to the way Excella works and the way I've definitely managed my engagements is to try and build a culture of trust. And with that culture of trust, we have people on the ground who are able to identify security shortcomings and bring them to the attention of, both the government and everyone on the team, so we can have an open discussion and find the best ways forward. It's not always the case that something like that happens. Sometimes if you're going through code, maybe even code that you wrote, and you take a look and you have an oh no moment. I shouldn't have done this when I put the code in a year ago. Let me just fix it real quick and not tell anyone. That's kind of an anti-pattern. What we try and do is bring that to the forefront. We have the conversation in this realm of trust with the client, with our people, and we figure out the best ways forward. That is really key to getting everyone, like you said, to put on that seatbelt, to do the right things. It's something that we found our federal clients have really appreciated.
Well, Doguhan, I know you're from Turkey. I'm going to introduce you to how they speak in rural Oklahoma. I go there all the time. And the phrase that you use in rural Oklahoma is, you got you a dilemma. Get you a dilemma. Let me give you a dilemma here. The dilemma is the federal government wants to move to zero trust. And on the other hand, they have a lot of legacy systems that may be a tough fit. And so the dilemma is, do you rip and replace? What do you do? And how do you make that choice? And, legacy systems, at what point in time is it, no, we gotta get a whole new car. I can't fix that motor anymore. So how do you answer the dilemma of moving to zero trust in a timely manner?
Moving to zero trust is an attitude that needs to be shared across the organization, and it is impossible without the right enterprise level software available to everyone at the organization, because there are lots of IT systems that require admin access, et cetera. And if that access is not maintained in a manner where people can check in and check out for only the amount of time they need it, we kind of break the zero trust circle right then and there. It is easier to implement in newly built greenfield systems. And, for example, at our current system, we don't have access to the runtime environment. We don't have access to the production systems. So, whenever we need to do something, we need to declare that we're going to do something. If we don't declare that, we consider that a bad act in and of itself. So we train every team member to be very careful about how they behave around the system. So it's an attitude from the most junior team member all the way up to the top, and it requires thorough support and rip and replace in some cases, because the DNA of that zero trust has to be built all the way into the internals of the application. One mechanism we use is least privilege access, which the users of the system are only given access to functions that they require to perform their jobs, and they can only see the data that they need to see to operate within the system. So it's about reducing the attack surface. It's about limiting access and the window of opportunity to do something bad.
Well, Keith, I have a question about the early days of the internet and a question about today, and it involves names. I don't know, maybe you or maybe your father studied this, but in the early days of the internet, they had something called Archie. They had something called Veronica, and they had a lot of fun with these early names. And it was kind of a lighthearted thing. And that's continued in some ways it hasn't. And today we have something called Google's Dora, D-O-R-A. So nothing to do with Archie. But so tell us about Dora, and where's this fit discussion, especially the way that Excella handles software development?
The DORA Research Project is being run by Google. It's a collaboration of thousands of different contributors, and it is trying to answer the question of what's the best practices in the DevOps world. And as they dug farther into DevOps and the research project matured over time, they realized that they were uncovering not just what's good for a DevOps world, but what is good for software development, what is good for organizations to, enable actions to happen. And they started with taking some key measurements, and they prepared, the state of DevOps reports on an annual basis. The most recent one just came out, and it's, a very handy resource for folks that are looking to dive into the modern software world to begin to figure out how these different tools and components that everyone's been using kind of fit together and lead to what we call elite performance metrics.
And I think that's what the listeners want to know. They want to know, okay, Excella has had drastic growth in the last 15 years. I've seen it. And it's got to be a reason for it. Is it just best talent, best process? So what's the secret sauce, Doguhan? What's the magic?
That's one of the most difficult questions to answer because we always pain ourselves when we are writing, responding to RFPs or RFIs. How do we explain the way we work? And because, when it comes out of the wash on the other side of it and we read our competitors' RFPs and RFIs, everyone's capable of writing beautiful sentences and, use the right buzzwords and everything, on paper to represent themselves. However, at Excella, we've been at the forefront of Agile from, day one. It is always shocking to people who join Excella just how agile we are to the bone. Being able to iterate and push forward relentlessly is one of the keys to our success. And also, part of some of the core tenets of the way we work is speed to value. We deliver value faster than others. We're not, and I'm not talking about we deliver our technology faster than others. We deliver value faster than others. So it's really important to distinguish between those two things. And then we operate at elite performance. We've taken the DORA research program to heart, how it connects DevOps things like continuous development and tie that to developer happiness or, customer outcome. And then we also focus on delivering organizational impact just beyond the project that we deliver. So, for example, when it comes to cybersecurity, we focus on delivering security outcomes and not just compliance. It's, kind of, once again, relatively easy to sit there and check boxes with a compliance officer, but it's really difficult to actually every week, have a team check-in about security and make sure we're secure. It's really difficult for an engineer to self-identify an issue they found. And then we celebrate that as a team, congratulate them for finding that vulnerability and coming forward. So that trust and freedom that we give to each individual on our teams, and this also includes subcontractors that we work with. Everyone becomes a team member, equal team member. So all these factors combined, I think, is part of why we succeed at every opportunity that we get to be on.
So, Keith, compliance would be, I go to your garage, I open up your door, yeah, you have a seatbelt, and it works fine. So going beyond and looking at the outcomes is, I sit in the car and watch you drive and make sure you wear your seatbelt. So that's the next step, isn't it?
Yeah. Even in kind of our practical situation, we deal with government agencies that are experimenting with cloud native architectures. And I say experimenting, I mean, it's something that's known in the outside world, but in the Gov Cloud, this is something that they are, embracing. Some agencies are embracing it quicker than others. But there are some things that we have to go in as Excella consultants and remind the government that they, should put passwords on their Jenkins nodes. It's not necessarily in the purview of us delivering a software package to the government in which the vulnerability arises, but we are active, curious, and engaging our government clients on many levels to help them better their security position. Almost like going in to make sure the seatbelts are there in the car, but also checking the brakes before you leave.
Oh, boy, a next level up. That's pretty good. So, Doguhan, I have a friend who works for BP, and he's a software developer. And, the regular complaints, and they talk about hot sauce and all the regular stuff and everything else. And I'm just thinking about, No, your job and Keith's job is a little bit different than that. I mean, you got you're both in the race as my friend, but you got like a log carrying you behind you called the compliance log. And it's a still race. And so I think everything you're trying to do as far as agile software development, I mean, it's difficult and hard to accomplish, but you have this added burden of compliance. It's got to take it to the next level. Maybe that's the differentiator with Excella, is that it can also accomplish this magic trick with all this burden of compliance and security.
Initially, it was a log. However, we've kind of conquered that process and became great partners with our information security officers and that whole security operations center. By the way, you can notice me, I'm trying to avoid acronyms as much as possible.
Every 12 minutes, we have a mandate here.
I could make my sentences much shorter by dropping 5 acronyms a minute. We've become partners, and working with the CIO level and down, we have switched our technologies to the right one. So we shifted our systems, our security, to the left, as closer to the developer as possible. And we've also leveraged that shared responsibility model with AWS, where we leverage technologies like AWS Fargate, where AWS is responsible of the runtime environment, and we just run our containers on top of that. So all of this has allowed us to master the compliance aspect of things to a point where now we are the ones as a team that are letting the organization know about vulnerabilities that are coming up in the wild. And not only we apply our patches before there can even be guidance issued in the agency, but we've patched them, pushed that to production already, but we're also proactively communicating that vulnerability. So if you play with the system and work to improve the system, it is very possible to gain champions within the federal government to help you succeed and remain very productive. In fact, when we shifted left, we've reduced our O&M budget, operations and maintenance budget, by 90%. That's a staggering amount that has saved a ton of resources for our team to be able to further innovate and further push those not bleeding but leading edge technologies that can further improve our efficiency. So
Keith, I'm taking notes here. I'm writing down elite performance, reducing cost, and I'm trying to come up with a title for this podcast here. I'm thinking the title may be these 5 words: organizational impact beyond project delivery. Because yes, it's a seatbelt. Oh, we check the brakes too. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're going beyond.
I like that title. That really kind of syncs up with our delivery philosophy.
I don't have any acronym in there, Doguhan, so we're in trouble. Well, I'm going to ask you both a quick question, then we have to cut off here. Everyone likes projections the next 5 to 7 years. So I'm going to ask Keith first. Where do you see this whole system evolving in the next few years? And then we'll toss to Doguhan. So Keith, project development the next 5 years, what's going to happen?
What's going to happen? All right. Putting on my magic hat, not being held accountable for what pops up in the magic 8 ball. I will say that there have been a lot of executive orders and presidential memos that have come out recently. This has prompted folks, especially OMB, to take a look at contract language. And I'm getting a feel similar to early 2000s when FISMA came out that, there will be an across-the-board update to contract language, which will be mandating zero trust principles, either compliance in part or in whole, or the NIST definition of what zero trust architecture is. So I see that gaining momentum. I also see the government looking outside of top-down regulation. So one of my clients in the national security market has taken a look at the key measures from DORA research project and has begun to systematically create metrics around those for their project portfolios. So we have folks in the government agency that's looking to private industry and in these best practices for software development to implement their policy as well. There are some additional kind of innovations happening. One is OSCAL, which is almost I'm going to geek out a little bit. It's like a markup language for FISMA compliance policies, those 700 plus policies for a high FISMA system. Yeah. You can actually tag your code where you're complying, and you can show how you're complying, and you can meet all the requirements. So you don't have to do 1,000 pages of documentation when you get your authority to operate on a FISMA high system. You can actually just mark up the code. And, that lets the security personnels, the ISSOs, the information security officers, understand when something's changing rather than relying on the project team itself to come back and have that conversation. So those are my predictions.
Yeah. So Keith says more shift left. Doguhan, what do you say?
More legislation.
Huh.
So I've had a unique journey, because being a, hands-on coder to now being several layers separated from that. It's kind of like watching a musical. It's, at some point you realize that all of the, C-level suite folks and managers and non-technical folks, they're just looking at the play. But they don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And from my perspective, software development is still having its, Wild West moment. So if it's like where civil engineering was maybe in the early 1900s or late 1800s. And, today it's unacceptable, if not criminal, to build a bridge that will collapse and kill people. And it is extremely scary. The systems that we rely on are built with just very little checks and balances. There is no personal responsibility. And we need to kind of get to a place where we treat software engineering as seriously as civil engineering or architects. And perhaps at the state level, we need to start certifying folks. And, there needs to be consequences to delivering bad code.
Well, we're going to have to end our conversation now. We're kind of running out of order. I would like to thank our guests, Doguhan Uluca, Principal Fellow Modern Software Delivery, and Keith Mealo, Engagement Manager from Excella. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.